So I may not talk about it much with my channel being centered around video games, but I love watching sports. And with the MLB All-Star Game approaching, I think it's time that we merge those two interests for a video. Now I couldn't decide exactly which game I wanted to play, since there are a lot that I played as a kid that I wanted to replay for nostalgia, and there's also some other games I wanted to try. So I decided to play almost all of them. I took one baseball game from every year since 1997 and played until I pitched a strikeout in each one. Sounds easy on paper, but spoiler alert, some games just straight up said no. There aren't many rules here for the challenge, but for consistency's sake, I will clarify a couple things. I played each game on the default difficulty. Whatever the game started on is the difficulty I played. I decided to keep everything fair and start the timer as soon as I hit start game, and I didn't allow myself to skip any of the pre-game cutscenes, mainly because I don't know if anyone ever watches them, and also I wanted to see how everything changes presentation-wise from year to year. Due to how some games were recorded, I was a little late hitting the stop button, so I did manually retime every game. So if you see me say a time that doesn't match the stop timer on screen, that's why. Now, the big rule that will affect the timing of each game is that I have one shot. I can't restart once I've started unless there is a technical glitch, and if one does come up, I will mention it. So if I don't get a strikeout in the first inning, I can't just throw the game away, restart, try again over and over, because that's boring. But also, I actually have to try. And what I mean by that is if I can't get a strikeout in the first inning, I actually have to try to score runs on offense. It may not always happen, but I at least have to try. I just can't stand up there and swing the bat for 3 pitches and get myself out. Likewise on defense, I can't play really bad defense on purpose just to get more attempts at getting a strikeout. The rule of having to try applies there as well. Whatever time I ended with after one attempt is the time that I will show on screen. And how game releases work, I'm going to say this, I'm still probably going to get a comment about it, but if there is a year on the box, that is what it's going to count as. For instance, this game has a big old 98 on the box. It released in 1997. We are counting it as 1998 because it says on the box 98. I don't know why game companies did this a lot back in the day. It just makes it annoying and a little hard to keep track of. But for simplicity, if there's a number on the box, that's what number it is. And if there's no number on the box, we actually default to what year it released in. And finally, I did not allow the use of cheats, Easter egg players, bonus rewards, or gameplay tuning, just to keep everything fair. Now that the rules are out of the way, let's take the mound and play ball. Starting up, we have backyard baseball, which I've surprisingly never played before. I have a feeling that if I grew up with the game, I would have played the hell out of it, but I never knew this game existed until I was much older because I didn't have a ton of internet access. And by that time, I'd moved on to games with a lot better graphics and a lot newer. So because I wasn't familiar with this game, I couldn't figure out how to start out as the home team, so I actually had to take some at-bats. And because I actually have to try, I can't just intentionally swing and miss, but I did get a single before getting to pitch. Took me a couple batters to figure out how the pitching worked, but I did manage to somehow strike out the legend himself, Pablo Sanchez, stopping the timer at 8 minutes and 15 seconds. Moving on to the series that I'm probably the second most familiar with, we have Triple Play Baseball 1998, which I think is the only installment of the series that I haven't yet played, so I was caught off guard by the presentation a bit. We get an FMV intro zooming into the stadium, which you can definitely tell this is a PS1 game because it has full motion video, and then we go straight into a trivia game while the game actually loads. And a lot of these older games, I tried to play in stadiums that don't exist anymore, or use teams that either change their logos and uniforms or completely move to a different place. That's why we're playing in the Astrodome, which this is one of the last years the Astros played in it before moving to their current ballpark. On the part of the challenge that is actually on the thumbnail of the video though, we start out by pitching horribly. I honestly don't know whether I'm doing something wrong or if there's something wrong with my game, but I could not find the strike zone to save my life, and somehow managed to only give up 1 run, but didn't manage to record a strikeout. After taking some at-bats, I managed to get the pitching a bit under control, and because of some now extinct baseball rules, I got the opposing pitcher to come up to the plate, and he lined out to the shortstop. But I did manage to get the next batter to swing and miss, ending this game at 10 minutes and 47 seconds. In our last game in the 1900s, we are using MLB 99, and we're visiting the Kingdome in Seattle, which in the year 2000 did this. But anyway, we opened to another rendition of the national anthem in a rotating pan of the stadium, before being welcomed by Vin Scully, who was one of my favorite announcers, and I loved every time I got to hear a game he called, but unfortunately we don't actually get too much time to hear his announcing in this game, as we get the third batter of the inning to go 1-2-3, and we get our fastest time so far at 2 minutes, 16 seconds. And yes, I know there's a mouse on my timer. I did not notice for multiple games that I was recording the mouse through OBS. It's fixed now, but there's quite a few games that the mouse is just there, and it irritates me now. Now that we have crossed into the current millennium, we move back to Triple Play, and to one of the two games that I played the most growing up. And while we talk about this and the next game, I'm just going to let the music from this game play through because it is way catchier than it has any right to be. We are picking Olympic Stadium in Montreal, and we are using the Red Sox here because I wanted to show off how weird knuckleballs are in the Triple Play series. I mean, they're weird in real life too, but they just look really silly here. And Tim Wakefield was the only one I could remember without creating a custom player. Looking back though, this was a slight mistake because knuckleballs are not designed for strikeouts. They're designed to be weak ground balls to the infielder for easy outs. So because of this, we weren't getting close to any strikeouts through 3 innings. Once the other team pushed across a run due to me holding the wrong button and throwing to the wrong base, I changed pitchers to one who is better suited to just throw the ball past the batters. That didn't make it any easier, as in the 5th and 6th innings, I never even got to 2 strikes on a batter before they put it into play. And this pattern continued into the 7th, where I got lucky with 2 on and 2 out. I got a ball to go barely foul, and then 2 swings later, we have a strikeout at 17 minutes, 37 seconds. Triple Play 2001 is the one game I wish I didn't have the rule about no extras and rewards and unlockables, and it's why this is one of my favorite games ever. I do have to keep the script a bit shorter, so I'll talk more about the game on the second channel, where I'm going to play through a few of, but not all the games. Mainly the ones that are real interesting or kind of hold a lot of nostalgia for me. I'm going to play through like a full game of each one, so if you're interested, there will be a link somewhere, click that, but I'll get back to the challenge. I wanted to play as the Anaheim Angels in one of the last years before they changed their uniforms to the red ones they have today. And we now have our second stadium we're playing in that no longer exists, Three Rivers Stadium in Pittsburgh. We get a chance for a strikeout in the first inning, getting the batter into a 0-2 count before having him slap a single down the line. We don't have any chances until the 4th, getting 2 different batters into 2-strike counts, but both ended in soft contact to the middle infielders. In the 6th inning, I found another knuckleballer in the bullpen and proceeded to have a repeat of the last game, getting a lot of weak contact instead of missed swings. But after getting a really bad swing on a fastball nowhere near the plate, I got a swing and miss on a knuckleball, ending the timer at 28 minutes and 20 seconds. All-Star Baseball was one of the series that I was not familiar with at the beginning of doing this challenge, but we now have an upgrade of both console and graphics. But like MLB 99, where we actually had more control of where we were throwing the ball, once I figured out what the buttons I was pushing actually did, I locked in and tied for first place with 2 minutes and 16 seconds. I think most of the long times are behind us. And that was wishful thinking, as we are back to when EA Sports is good, and their new baseball series, MVP Baseball. Now we have much more fluid movement and graphics than Triple Play, and in theory, strikeouts should be much easier to come across. Except in 2003, they still kept around a lot of the arcade action Triple Play had, meaning there's a lot more balls in play than there are strikeouts. Now we have another stadium that no longer exists, Veterans Stadium in Philadelphia, and we're taking advantage of the fact that we can now change which jerseys our team uses rather than having it randomly chosen by the game. And if we were going for returning double plays, we would be in great position with having turned 2 pretty impressive twin killings in the first 3 innings, but not really even getting close to a strikeout. In the 4th inning, we swapped from a pitcher who should clue you into what my favorite NFL team is, to a pitcher who in real life averaged over a strikeout per inning. But it would take until the last batter of the 6th inning where we got lucky and got into a 2-strike count due to the batter fouling one off. One curveball later and we lock in our time at 14 minutes and 41 seconds. Now when I was gathering all the games to play for this challenge, I originally was going to use MVP Baseball 2004, since it's the game that I definitely have played the most as a kid, and even record a run for it. But I actually decided to swap it out for High Heat 2004 just to get an extra game series squeezed in here. But I'm going to actually show off MVP 04 because it's one of the only old games I know of that has Hiram Bithorn Stadium, I think I pronounced that right, which still stands in Puerto Rico and was used as the part-time home stadium for the Montreal Expos. Yeah, I'll let you figure that out. I don't know how it makes sense, but Major League Baseball did that at one point. Now back to High Heat. I have some mixed thoughts about it, but I'm gonna need to play more of it to actually make up my mind about it. Aside from that, we go back to only being able to generally suggest roughly where in the strike zone we're throwing the ball. And because I originally picked these teams based on the uniforms I had unlocked in MVP 2004, I got stuck using a bad team facing a very good team. Fortunately enough, I had a future Hall of Famer decide to just not swing at multiple strikes and then swung nowhere close to where the ball was, ending the inning and this game's timer at 3 minutes and 35 seconds. MLB 2005 sees us return to a more cinematic and realistic TV presentation of the game, and even though I've owned this game since I was about 10, I've only played this one a few times, mainly because it was a lot harder than MVP 04. It honestly took until a few years ago for me to appreciate games being hard and not just playing on easy mode. But other than that, this game is one I don't hear talked about enough. I hear a lot being talked about MVP 2005, but this one should be talked about more. It's got a super advanced Dynasty mode, and the quality in the presentation beats out a lot of the modern games. Sure, the graphics aren't as great as some of the modern games, but it has quality, and that's a little harder to find. And there weren't any specific choices made about teams or stadiums in this one. I just kind of selected a couple at random. But having said all that, the game did suffer in the fact that since we aren't allowed to skip the opening presentation, we finally get to our first pitch only a few seconds before our current first place entries in. But aside from that, we get a strikeout on the second batter, giving us a very respectable 3 minutes and 36 seconds, which is one of our better times, even with the extra handicap. Now for 2006, we are going back to the MVP series, but EA didn't make a baseball game featuring Major League Baseball teams in 2006. It did, however, use Division I college teams, and a feature that appeared in MVP 2005, but now in much expanded form, being able to create a custom ballpark. Now when given the chance to be a little chaotic, I'm going to jump on that chance, and created this abomination. It also gives me the chance to play as my favorite college team, but unfortunately for the amount of time I put into building this monstrosity, I only had to throw 3 pitches to earn a strikeout, taking the top spot so far at 1 minute and 37 seconds, even with sitting through the opening presentation. We go to the year 2007, where we see our first instance of the MLB The Show series, but it's not the first time we've seen this development team. 989 Sports, who did the MLB 2005 and MLB 99, which we've looked at earlier, merged into Sony and adopted the title of The Show, which we have been made until today. Much like the previous installment of the video, they certainly took their time getting to the actual gameplay, being almost 2.5 minutes before even getting control. But unlike the previous game where we got the second batter to strike out, we spent a lot longer getting 3 strikes here. Out of all the opportunities, whenever I was able to get 2 strikes on a hitter, they suddenly became unable to miss hitting the ball on their swing. I'm thinking I should have picked what pitchers I was using a little more carefully, as I was just going for a pitcher that I wanted to play as. Jamie Moyer, who has starred in 2 of the best commercials ever for a baseball player. For as good as he was in his career, strikeouts were not his calling card, but pitching to contact was. First inning came and went, second inning came and went, as did the 3rd, 4th, 6th, 7th, and 8th innings. I did not help my own case here on the timing because I had the rule that I had to at least try on offense. I managed to accidentally hit 6 homers, resulting in 14 runs. As I was starting the 9th inning, I was starting to panic a little bit, because if I wasn't able to get a strikeout in this inning, I was going to have to start a new game, and I wasn't going to be able to kill the timer until it ended. Luckily, on the second batter of the inning, I got him to swing at a ball in the dirt, mercifully ending the timer at 42 minutes and 23 seconds. And now for 2008, we're going to get a little silly with it. If I have an excuse to play as a pretty anime girl, I'm going to take it. Now, I've never actually played a Mario baseball game before, and I haven't played a Wii game in a while, so it took me a little bit to figure out what I was doing for a minute, but after getting a bit of a lead, Mario decided to help me out and stand still as a statue, seeming absolutely stunned that I would throw a pitch over the plate, ending this split at 7 minutes and 29 seconds. Going from a stadium that doesn't exist to a stadium that no longer exists because it managed to shit itself, it's not a joke, we open up MLB 2K9 and play as the Minnesota Twins in the Metrodome. Now, I've played a couple different baseball games from the 2K series before, but I didn't remember how the pitching worked. So this entire attempt, I could not tell you where I was throwing or even what I was throwing. And fun fact, if you're in a pressure situation, such as bases loaded, the game decides to say fuck you and makes your pitching reticle bounce around more than a 3-year-old on Mountain Dew and cocaine. Somehow I managed to get the pitches to miss inside the strike zone and managed to get a swing and miss completely out of random chance and not out of skill, mercifully ending this leg of the challenge at 3 minutes and 45 seconds. I think if I hadn't gotten the strikeout there, this split would have been a whole lot longer. Moving on to MLB 2K10, which I am more familiar with, and actually changed the pitching mechanics to the ones I remember from 2K, we have a new team to play as. As a few years prior to this game, Montreal moved to Washington, D.C. and became the Nationals, so I wanted to include them somewhere on here. One thing of note, we have a chunk of games that are just the 2K series because 1, they were cheaper for me to get a hold of, and 2, after 2013, the main game series that comprises like 90% of all baseball games is just the show, so I'm going to take every opportunity to play a game that's not the show for variety's sake. Although they changed the pitching mechanics from one I didn't know how to pitch to one I could figure out, they did keep the pitcher rattled mechanic in, so after spending an inning kind of floundering and being real rusty with controls, and then not doing much on offense to get me to the top of the second inning, I did remember slightly how to actually aim my pitches and managed to strike out the first batter of the inning, ending at 7 minutes and 13 seconds. I don't actually have too much to say about MLB 2K11, as we have reached the point in history where the game started to turn into Call of Duty. They kind of stopped innovating a bunch and changed about 3 graphics and updated the rosters to sell you the same game at full price the next year. But aside from the curse of modern gaming from a game that is over 15 years old, my knees, we didn't manage to get a strikeout in the first inning, but we did get our strikeout almost precisely on the 9-minute mark. We have another 2K game up next, but I managed to find a copy that at least looks and functions different. I also took the opportunity to have a Reds versus Red Sox matchup, because why not? And because this is a DS game, not a 3DS game, even though that was out by this time, they had to change a lot of how the game functions. So I will say, I managed to strike out the first batter of the game, ending our time at 1 minute 29 seconds, and although the game looks normal here during the pitching and hitting, just look at what they had to do to make the game run on the DS. I mean, it works, and it makes sense for this game, it just looks goofy as hell. But we will come back to the handheld games later. We boot up the last game that 2K made for baseball, and since there wasn't really any stadiums or teams to specifically use here, I just used a couple teams that I hadn't used yet. And we have another change to how pitching mechanics work, and therefore another chance for me to learn how to pitch again, for about the 10th time this video. Now, I wasn't paying attention to what I actually had to do, so I somehow didn't hit the batter with either of these wild pitches. If you're wondering, you have to actually rotate the stick to follow the pattern. I just thought you had to pull back and push forward, but since that's the mechanic that the fastball worked, I just switched to only throwing fastballs since those would stay near the plate. I somehow managed to get this back to a full count and then got a swinging strike 3 at 2 minutes and 42 seconds, sending off the 2K baseball series fairly strong. Now that we are moving into an era pretty well dominated by the show, we also enter an era where there's a few short years where my team was good. So I'm going to take advantage of that, and you're going to see a lot more of my team from here on out. This game does take a hit in loading time though, taking over 3 minutes until we even have control over the pitcher. But once we get a strikeout on 3 pitches and punch in our time with 3 minutes and 47 seconds, with the actual gameplay being 25 seconds. For 2015 and 2016, I kind of want to cover them together, just for the fact that the pitchers I decided to use both tragically lost their lives not too long after these games were made, and I don't want to make light of it. I wanted to use these pitchers to kind of help honor their legacies, because they were 2 of my favorite pitchers during this time. For the show 15, I used Yordano Ventura, and we got a strikeout in 2 minutes 48 seconds. And the show 16, we used Jose Fernandez and got a strikeout at the 3 minutes 6 second mark. I realized that I'm not going into too great detail over these 2 years, but I didn't want to make light of anything about these pitchers, so I'll hold back a little bit of the humor, but I wanted to be respectful about it. Now let's get back to the original script when my voice wasn't as shot. Instead of just jumping into the show 17, we have another game we can use to shake it up again. I found another Mario baseball game, this time for the 3DS, Mario Sports Superstars. Of course, I'm going to use my waifu Daisy and immediately give up an absolute tank down the line. I do get the second batter to strike out looking and get one of our fastest times at 1 minute 55 seconds. I do wish there were more baseball games with anime girls out there, but unfortunately that seems to not be a big market. Now, when playing the show 18, I did have some issues. With a lot of the newer games, I actually ended up renting them from my local library, which helped cut down on the cost of this video. Otherwise, it probably wouldn't have been made. But one drawback to that is I have 2 consoles to use for newer games. I can use a Nintendo Switch, which has worse frame rates and graphics, or I can use my PS4 and have to deal with potentially scratched discs. This is one where the disc was scratched enough to where it wouldn't fully install, but I could still play the game. It was just locked to a demo version where I couldn't pick the teams, and it cut out all the pregame presentation. So because I'm broke, we're going to actually use the demo tutorial as this game's attempt. Instead of the pregame presentation, every time I hit restart here, it gives me about 4 seconds until I can gain control of pitching. And even though we have such an advantage with the timing, we don't even have the fastest attempt in the video due to giving up a couple hits and being mocked by the game's trophies. Still, we clock in at a very quick 1 minute and 30 seconds, although very appropriately for the time, I will put an asterisk next to this one for the missing load time. Now, this video was originally supposed to be made for MLB opening day, is when I kind of planned to make it. But mainly due to this game, it got pushed back to late May. And at that point, I decided to wait, save this one for the All-Star break so it's at least somewhat thematic to the baseball season. But on the positive side, it did allow me to not say stupid predictions about my team and be more realistic about their playoff chances. But long story short, I had the show 19 originally lined up to be this year's entry, but it stayed on hold at the library for 2 months before I just finally gave up and canceled it. I didn't really want to spend more on games for this video since I had a budget of about $3 and already passed out a long time ago. But I did manage to find a copy of RBI Baseball 19 for pretty cheap, so I decided to use that. Now, I had never even seen gameplay of this game, but I vaguely remembered seeing commercials for it a few years ago when they would advertise it on the MLB score tracker. So I knew it existed, but I'd never seen the game, seen the gameplay, anything like that. And I didn't realize how bad of a game it was. The menus looked fine, but as soon as the game loaded, I realized why this game series doesn't get made anymore. The player models look fine graphically, but the animations are just bad, and there's no announcers. So it's just generic crowd noise, almost a generic text-to-speech giving you strike call and foul ball. Also, when it loads into the gameplay, that camera looks a little bit weird, and we suddenly got put back in time almost 20 years with triple play baseball again. Just without any soul or charm or just good. I really wanted to like this game, but yeah, I'm glad it only took us 1 minute 25 seconds to record a strikeout, becoming our fastest game so far, which is good for my mental health. Moving back to an actual good game, we have the show 20, where we get to show off one of my favorite stadiums that doesn't exist anymore, the Polo Grounds. Now, because I didn't think about it, but because the camera angle for pitching, we really only get 2 quick shots of why I like this stadium, and it's because the outfield looks like this. But even though I kind of wanted to show off more of the stadium, I got the final out of the first to be a strikeout and ended the clock at 3 minutes and 19 seconds. So, fun fact for the show 21, I accidentally labeled the run for 24 wrong. So the run I had labeled for 24 was just B-roll footage. And I cleared out my recycle bin. So the original run for the show 21 is lost to time. I don't even remember what teams I used or whatever. And I didn't notice this until I got to the edit. Had to pull an audible real quick. I decided to just hit a random team, and it took me to one of the minor league teams. So I decided, you know what? We haven't done minor leagues. Let's do minor leagues. So that's the entire decision behind playing the Yard Goats versus the Trash Pandas. If you haven't seen minor league baseball teams or independent baseball league team names, you should look into it. It's pretty fun. Anyway, outside of that, the entire run is like 2 minutes, 9 seconds for a strikeout, and this is after the game took about 6 hours to reinstall on my system. I'm not sure it was worth it. Launching into the show 22, we get to play in the Field of Dreams field, but unfortunately we don't actually get a good look at the field at all, so I'm having to include some extra footage in post, but we do have the first and only appearance of my least favorite team, New York Yankees. But at least I did make them wear their worst jerseys available, so that does make my petty heart feel a little bit better. Also, it makes me feel better to be using one of my favorite ever players and use a uniform that I think I might be the only one that actually likes. But it's also nice I was able to get a strikeout on the first batter, giving me a time of 1 minute and 28 seconds. And for the first time in a while, we have a non-MLB game. We have Super Mega Baseball 4, which does actually have some MLB players, just not any of the teams. So I decided I want to use one of the All-Star teams for this, and seeing he was one of the available players, I definitely wanted to use Big Sexy as my pitcher. And he seemed to be a good choice, as he got a strikeout 4 pitches in, giving a star strikeout only 1 minute and 10 seconds in. In the show 24, we're going to take advantage of the fact that we now have the City Connect uniforms available. I had to use some of the best available with San Diego. Now, I wasn't as fortunate with the pitching as I was the uniforms, as all 3 batters decided to hit ground balls to the infield, meaning that I had to pitch into the second inning for the first time in a while. And when we got to the second inning, the streak of ground balls continued for another batter, but fortunately, the second batter of the inning broke that streak with a strikeout, giving us a decent time at 5 minutes and 40 seconds. And now, we have a game that probably has a different release date for when it came out on mobile, but according to Steam, it came out in 2025, so we're going to count that. Once we get past the tutorial, which I'm pretty sure is programmed to let the first batter be an automatic strikeout, so I didn't want to count it, we have to launch into a preset game mode, so we don't actually get to choose what team we play against. So I have to start as the away team. Normally, this would be a minor inconvenience, but in this game, because we're starting out on baby mode, you can be on offense for a while. And the beginner CPUs are swinging at just about everything, which unfortunately they're decent at making contact and not striking out. For the first time since the show 07, we go above the 10-minute mark and get bailed out by some of the worst swings I've seen in a while, but a strikeout's a strikeout, and we get a total time of 10 minutes 35 seconds. And finally, for our last game, we have a very unique one, mainly because it was not originally part of the list of games that I was going to record. The original plan was to use the show 26, but I didn't really want to pay $60 when I've already had to buy quite a few of the other games on the list. My next choice was to use a Japanese baseball game series that is finally being released in Western audiences for the first time, but I didn't realize till after I recorded it that there's an AI content disclosure on the game, which sucks because I did enjoy actually playing the game, but I don't want to promote it now. The third backup to that was I noticed there was a new backyard baseball game coming out, but it doesn't release until after I wanted this video to be out, and the demo it has out is only a home run derby, so I can't even pitch. One other option I found was a game called Game Pulse Payoff Pitch, which I didn't want to buy the full game, but it does have a free demo out, but it's a tabletop game. You play baseball with dice, and it just didn't feel right because you can just essentially start a game, hit one button, get a strikeout in 10 seconds if you're lucky. So I did end up shelling out for a game, but luckily it didn't have to shell out like $60 or $70 for the show. Remember how I was saying I wish there was more games with anime girls? Well, I found one. We have Hollow Base, which came out in April of 2026. And yes, it features a lot of the talents from the Japanese branch of Hololive. I'm realizing there's a Venn diagram of people who understand baseball, people who understand VTubers. There's a little bit of crossover, especially past couple years. Hololive's been having some events with the Dodgers. But yeah, thought this game would be interesting, so here we go. The pitching is a little weird because you're just set up to throw down the middle every time, and you just have a normal, slow, and fast pitch, and then you just curve the ball like after you've thrown it. And yeah, it's hard to get a strikeout. On normal difficulty, it also sets you up with 3 innings to work with, so I didn't even think about that till I got into the challenge. But every time I put the ball inside the strike zone, the other team would hit it. So I wasn't getting swings and misses, and they weren't just letting balls go by them. So it became a little difficult to get strikes. In fact, I actually won a game without getting a strikeout. So luckily there is a quick rematch button in the menu, and it took until the second inning of that one, but I was able to get a strikeout. Even though we were on game number 2, we still had a decently respectful time at 13 minutes and 51 seconds. So what have we learned? Well, apparently a lot of the older games were harder to get strikeouts in. I'm not sure if it's due to having smoother controls or a better understanding of the video games, or if they just made games easier. It's honestly hard to tell, but we have clear winners. For the longest, we have MLB The Show 2007 was the hardest for me to get a strikeout, and our easiest would be Super Mega Baseball 4, and there's a difference of 40 plus minutes between the two of them. I don't know what the data says, but I had fun with the challenge, and maybe eventually I'll do another sports challenge similar to this, but maybe like basketball or football or something. But I think the next one we're going to be going back to more traditional video games. But yeah, if you've enjoyed, it would help me out if you leave a like on the video, subscribe, comment, all that stuff. But until the next one, this has been the Wreaker of Chaos, and let chaos reign.